Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for joining the Promark and Scale Computing webinar today. My name is Carleen Edge, Marketing Manager at Promark Technology. Today's presentation will last approximately 45 minutes. In terms of general housekeeping, your lines have been muted for the duration of the webinar. And if you have any questions, please feel free to type your question in the Q&A box on your screen, and all questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us today. And now I will hand things over to Scott Mann, Director of North American Channel Sales. Scott, take it away.
Thank you, Carleen. I appreciate that. And welcome, everybody. We probably have a couple more people still hopping on here, but we'll get started because we're going to start this off setting the tone or building up a little into the presentation before we get into really the meat of it. Because I realize that this title, How MSPs Can Thrive in the Modern Digital Transformation Era, while it's a long title, it's also very ambiguous. There's a lot of different interpretations for that. So specifically what we're talking about when I say digital transformation is IoT and some of the exactly what IoT and the influence that it's having on things like hardware manufacturers and how that's influencing other vendors like Scale Computing and the Hyperconvergence community, and how we're being able to leverage this type of technology to benefit these mass projects that are happening, these mass transformations that are happening in these large organizations. So without further ado, we'll get into the presentation. I'm going to start off with a couple definitions, just defining some of these key terms, and then we'll get into it. And the result, the takeaway from this, more importantly, that there's this big trend happening with digital transformation, and there is what the influence that it's having on vendors like us is directly impacting how managed service providers can create an offering around a solution like this. So it's actually benefiting. While you think that digital transformation maybe applies more so in the enterprise space, in these large retail organizations, manufacturing, construction, it actually applies really well into the SMB and the MSP space as well. So we'll talk a little bit about how that applies. And then we're going to kind of talk high-level roadmap, but really what we're coming out with, not even in the near future. I'm talking we're in pre-sales of it here around the corner. So some of the new products that we have coming out that will be a great benefit, something that you could actually build a very interesting product offering around as a managed service provider yourself. So let's get into this. I mentioned let's define a couple key terms because we're using a lot of big ambiguous terms that are very subjective. So the first one, hyperconvergence. Many of you that have followed us on these webinars that we do have heard this presentation from us before, so you're very familiar with it, but I see a lot of names on here that haven't necessarily seen that. So let's start off with what exactly is hyperconvergence? What is HDI? Because this term has become very subjective depending on who you're talking to. More so it becomes subjective based on the vendor that you're talking to and the target market that they're going after. While we coined this term hyperconvergence, we intended it for the small to medium-sized audience. So we were creating a solution for these smaller IT departments that didn't have an IT team of 10 to 20 people. They had 1 to 5 in IT, and they needed to manage all of these different layers within the virtual infrastructure. So essentially what we were creating is a smartphone for the infrastructure world. We were trying to take a couple different layers, like your smartphone is your cell phone, it's your calendar, it's your Rolodex and many other functional tools, put into one single user interface, one single management layer for all of those aspects, or for all those functional tools. That's the same kind of concept as hyperconvergence. We wanted to create a more efficient, an easier to manage solution on the infrastructure side. So integrating the compute storage, so your server, so the compute resources, so your servers, your storage, your NAS and your SAN type functionality, and the virtualization layer all into one single solution architecture so that it could be managed by these smaller IT shops, by these MSPs that are managing multiple customers across a large region, or smaller customers that have 1 to 5 people in IT that are typically IT generalists that are juggling a lot of different projects on their plate, and being the reason why they're relying on a value-added resellers because they don't have that extensive size team, so they need to outsource that expertise to folks like yourself. Now, the other big question is digital transformation. That's one of those big buzz terms now, DX, as some refer to it as, digital transformation, digital evolution. There's a lot of different ways that people have been positioning this, but that's one of those things that, depending on who you're talking to and the specific use case, digital transformation itself has a lot of different business outcomes, but ultimately what it is digital transformation as a whole. It's you're trying to modernize, using modern digital technology. You're trying to increase efficiency, or improve business processes with the ultimate outcome of being fully focused on improving the customer experience. So this ranges across tons of different verticals. Specifically, we're going to dive into the IoT aspect of it. Now there's IoT, there's AV, there's VR, there's all these other aspects that you might be encountering for other solutions that you're coming out with. For us in this world on the infrastructure side of it, IoT is a very large influencer for us. So we'll focus a little bit more on that. And the gist of it is that what DX is doing, it's influencing trends that is directly impacting hyperconverged solutions and manufacturers like ourselves, which is directly creating an opportunity for you as an MSP. So that's what we're going to tie this all together. What is this digital transformation that people are going on, how it's influencing the markets today, how it's influencing the hardware manufacturers, and how us as hyperconverged vendors are leveraging that to create a solution that's not only beneficial to these large enterprises, it's also beneficial to you as an MSP to add to your solution offering, even for those smallest of customers. So that's the story we're going to come around to. To start things off, though, I've used this slide many times before, and I actually kind of brought it back out of my presentations from a few years back because I love this slide and what it depicts and what we talked about a few years ago. This slide here shows the overview of the HDI market, and I believe it's from 2017, if I'm not mistaken, but it might be from 2018 as well. But the purpose of the slide is it's showing the opportunity of hyperconverged integrated systems, HCI, how big this market's going to grow. And why I always love this slide in particular is because if you look at the other layers, the integrated infrastructure, the reference architecture, all of these layers, you don't see them really drastically declining. You see them kind of stabilizing, and they've plateaued for sure, and they're not decreasing, they're not increasing, they're remaining pretty stagnant across the years. So now you think hyperconverged systems, usually it's a direct competitor to a traditional 3-2-1 infrastructure, and while that's definitely true, this graph is showing that it's not cannibalizing any of those markets over the years. So how does that make any sense? Because there has to be another opportunity or another market that hyperconverged serves. And now we come to 2020, and everybody's talking about 2020 being the year of the micro data centers, the smaller systems, the year of the edge, or the decade of the edge computing era. And this is where now hyperconverged technology, the actual technology, the underlying architecture of it all, can be applied to new markets, to new areas that are just developing. And there's probably even some other ones that are out there that we don't know yet. We don't know where it's going to impact. But this is where the big opportunity is. Yes, absolutely, we're still a great solution for a 3-2-1 architecture, and we're going to be more cost effective than it, and we're going to have a great value proposition against a solution like that. But now that's opening this new market for us, which creates an opportunity for you as an MSP in the enterprise space, in the true S of the SMB space as well. So on both sides of it. But ultimately, what's driving digital transformation? We mentioned the Internet of Things, and the Internet of Things. Basically it's a bunch of sensors collecting digital information outside of the data center. It's actually collecting information that is typically on the edge of their infrastructure, or the edge of the network, I should say. So it's not necessarily in the four walls of the data center. It might eventually connect back to those four walls of the data center, but it's at that remote site. It's on site at a grocery store, it's on site at a gas station, or it's from the industrial perspective, it's on the machine floor. It's not where the actual data center and where we built all these best practices around. And when I hear IoT, when I hear that term, outside of the consumer aspects and the things that you're using for it on a personal level, I really think of it as like large enterprises. Or I guess predominantly it's I guess perceived as a large enterprise solution, industrial IoT, finance, where they're trying to go tellerless at a lot of these remote branch offices, smart stores, where they're leveraging IoT to have a fully customized experience from when you walk in the door, even before you walk in the door, when you're putting your list into an application, and based on your buying habits, things that you might be running out of, these smart stores experiences are creating more than just I'm going to go online and I'm going to go order that milk to be delivered to my house or something like that. It's creating an experience that you can go to that store, and it's not just about getting that one item. It's about having that full end-to-end superstore type experience the whole process throughout it is extremely efficient because they're leveraging technology through things like digital signage, where that digital signage is now customized to you. If you're at a retail store, a clothing retailer, they have these now new digital signages where they can actually see what that item looks like on you. Do I even have to try that on? It's making this new customer experience, which is really, really interesting. And then there's logistics. Logistics are a huge one because time is money with logistics, and it's a very, very low margin. Trying to fight for the smallest of margins when you're shipping, or even if it's overseas, or if it's just transportation from state to state, for instance. Smart cities, that's probably the biggest buzz term that we hear, and healthcare is another large one as well, as we're kind of decentralizing healthcare and making it more regionalized. They're requiring all the same regulations and everything that a typical large enterprise would require, but it's now at a remote site almost. It's not where the central IT team is. It's in that local region where they don't have any IT presence on site there. Now, what this is creating is this new era of edge computing in the middle here. So on the left there, you see those things that are collecting the data, those sensors and data collectors. That's collecting our data, and it's doing some immediate analysis of any of that data that it's collecting to maybe adapt to my shopping experience, so that it can offer some suggestions on additional items I should add into my cart, or things that are on sale. And then everything from that perspective, all the data that it's collecting eventually gets passed back to the data center, where we've built all these within the four walls of that data center. We've built all these best practices around, and it does all the machine learning, really that AI stuff, and it pushes out processes across all the sites. So if this is a retail store that's got thousands of sites, it's going to push out all that data, any updates that are required across all the sites. So it's doing that big data analytics. But what's happening now is, on this data that's being collected from these things, this data now it's our sensitive data. It's their sensitive data, meaning intellectual property. It's also our sensitive data because it's collecting information about us that now has to be regulated. It's now mission critical information that they're collecting, but it's mission critical information that they're collecting outside of the data center, at the edge of the network. This is where edge computing comes into play, where it's going to need to process this data. We're going to need to have data center-like capabilities at this edge site, at this remote location, where it doesn't have the ideal conditions for a data center. It doesn't have a massive data center. It might be a data center in a closet. It might be a data center under the clerk's front desk. It might be a data center that has a footprint of a few feet by a few feet that everything has to live in for each one of their coffee shops, for instance. And we need to run this data center-like functionality at this site and be able to provide the same backup and redundancy and security regulations, sometimes even more secure information, more strict security, because it doesn't have those data center-like conditions. So this new edge computing era, it's having a pretty serious influence on the market, because now we're talking about billions of things that are predicted to be at billions of IoT sensors and data collectors that are going to be at these remote sites, which is creating this new need for a lot more edge computing, so resources at these sites. So now we've created this brand new market that is outside of the centralized data center, and we've kind of gone back out to that decentralized approach, where now we need to go and we need to harden what we have at the edge. We need to harden those resources that we have at the edge. So what is happening in manufacturers is we're kind of seeing a pendulum shift of everything used to be bigger, bigger, bigger. Right? In the 2010 era, everything was, let's go bigger with the data center. We need more petabytes of storage. We need more terabytes of RAM, so on and so forth. Now what's happening is, because of the edge, we're seeing manufacturers going smaller and smaller and smaller. We need the same amount of redundancy. We need the same amount of power, but we need it in a smaller footprint, and we need it at a price point that we can actually afford. We don't want to spend $50,000 at each one of our sites. We want to spend $5,000 less, maybe a little bit more, at each one of these sites. And when you're talking about from a cost perspective, every single dollar starts to add up in this perspective. So if it's a little extra RAM that you need to get because it's not the perfect system, it's a little extra RAM that costs a little extra money, that's exasperated by the tens of thousands of sites that they have, and that equals a large cost difference. It's not just one single site that we're referring to anymore. So now in this area, efficiency starts to become king. So now we're getting these smaller form factor systems that we can now run in these unique scenarios. in these non-data center-like conditions. This one right here being specifically a Lenovo SE350 node, which is a nice ruggedized server. Then you see other things like Intel NUCs and everything that are all being leveraged as a server-like node at these sites. So now the question is really, why HCI now? So we understand what's happening with digital transformation and what's changing with the hardware manufacturers, really what they're focusing on. But why does hyperconverged infrastructure make sense in this scenario? And it's a pretty simple answer. Traditional IT infrastructure, it's way too complex at those sites. When we think about traditional IT infrastructure, we think about having a team running it, right? We think about having multiple people managing multiple different layers of it, or having some sort of locality to it where they can just go and they can walk into the data center room and fix whatever needs to be fixed with minimal time. In the edge scenarios, we're on the edge of the network, so sometimes you can't even get a good connection into that site, or you have to drive hours or even fly into that site to be able to manage it. So the traditional IT infrastructure, it was really built for like these. I don't know if anybody follows any of the F1 series, but I watched a great Netflix documentary on it, and digging into it a little bit more, it really resonated a lot with me on what these IT infrastructure teams look like, and it's very similar to how a Formula One team runs. They have all these individualized teams, these individualized, isolated knowledge centers for each individual aspect of it, and they're experts in each one of those sections. You've got the tire management, the engine tuning, the aerodynamics, and all of these come together. Very capital intensive operation, but they come together with outstanding cooperation, and they make that Formula One race car get to the win the series on a I guess it's about 12 races a year. It's fantastic the way they have to collaborate to get all these things together, and then how many different knowledge centers that they have that need to collaborate together to be successful in this type of an industry. And now when you think of an IT team, it's very much what an IT team is doing. It's these IT infrastructures, they're built for these types of enterprises that have an individualized team for networking, application management, cybersecurity, virtualization and storage, so on and so forth, where they need this level of expertise. They need this level of people to manage all the different granularity because of all of the big data and everything that's happening at these data centers that we've created. But the reality of it is we don't have these types of resources at these edge sites. Edge deployments require an infrastructure that's incredibly easy to set up, because the more time that you have to spend setting it up, the longer it's going to take to deploy across all these thousands of sites. The more time it costs to manage it, the higher your costs are in managing all these solutions. And essentially, you want to set it and forget it type solution because you're deploying it at all these different sites. And you need to be able to start small. You need to be able to start from a site that doesn't have all these things at the site yet, because you're setting the footprint for it. It needs to be able to start with what they need today at that site that meets the cost that they have for it. But as they start to add in these new AI applications and all of this new IoT functionality, they need to be able to scale that very easily. So a solution that starts at the smallest threshold is key, and that they can scale into a solution that fits their needs in that 1 to 3 to 5 year plan that they have for the digital transformation. Because the reality of it is the infrastructure is a component of the digital transformation strategy. So what you're doing for your customers, or what in these scenarios, what needs to be done, they need to future-proof those sites. They need to start them with what they need today and put them with an infrastructure that they can grow into without breaking the bank today. And cost-effective being the last one. It needs to be cost-effective. That's where these smaller form factor systems come into play. And that's where scalability is so important, because starting at that small price point and getting to a point when they need it, they can evolve to it. And that's exactly what Scale HC3 was built for. So we, as I mentioned at the start, it was a solution that was built for those SMB mid-market customers. So when we combined all of these three functionalities, server, storage, networking, into one single solution, what we had in mind was creating an architecture that was hyper efficient. We knew that we needed to create an architecture that didn't consume a bunch of resources, that we could run on the smallest of workloads, because our customers are going to vary from the smallest size to larger sizes. A customer in the small to mid-market could have 5, 10 people in IT, they could still have hundreds of terabytes of storage. And we have many customers, I think our largest is running 1.5 TB. So we knew it wasn't a matter of the hardware needing to fit a certain size customer. It was a matter of the technology being able to fit a wide breadth of customers, a large range of customers. And it needed to be something that can be easy deployed because you're deploying this across multiple sites. It needs to be deployed quickly. It needs to be something that myself as a sales individual, I could deploy the system. And I might have tens to hundreds, thousands of sites to manage. So it needs to be able to be managed from one location that could be halfway across the world and have that built-in automation so that when this is running, I don't actually have to touch it. Because the more that these customers touch it, the more that their costs go up on managing the system, and the less time they have to focus on those proactive activities, those revenue generating, those efficiency creating activities and applications that they're creating on the back end. And then you need to start from that single node size, which is where we start from. We can start from a single node. You can scale up as needed, 3+ nodes, whatever's needed. 3 makes a cluster, but you could have a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, however many nodes you need in the cluster. And the efficiency design is the key part of this. So we're going to get that on the next slide. But most importantly, when you're talking about licensing across a lot of sites, it's key that we don't have an additional licensing cost to add on top of this. So while we're comparing this to a hardware that might be a single server at some of these sites, having a single node that has that functionality built into it with the virtualization built into it that doesn't have to be separately licensed just adds to that cost efficiency that we create for them. So now you're seeing, this is kind of where we're tying it back to from the MSP perspective. I've been saying edge computing, and I've been saying distributed enterprises, and talking about these large customers. And if you really tie all this together, you can think that everything that I'm saying probably resonates with you and the way you're managing all of your customers. Whether it be across a state, a full state, whether it be across the whole country, or whether it be across a city. You're managing those customers, and you need to be able to deploy these systems quickly, because the longer it takes to deploy it, that's a resource that you're dedicating to deploy that system. It needs to have that built-in automation because you don't want to actually manage that system. You want to make sure that that system is running, and you're providing that value of it running, being able to give them reports to say, here's all the things that we avoided by having this built in. But the more that you actually have to have somebody managing that system, the more they have to log into it, the more they have to go on site for it, the higher your costs are, so the lower your profits are. So it's basically a managed service provider is a distributed enterprise. So this is benefiting them from that perspective. Now the efficiency design I mentioned is very key, and this is where it ties into the hardware aspect of it. We're able to now, because we created the system, we can run on the most efficient, we can run on the most, I guess, smallest of systems that you could see from a hyperconverged perspective. And when I say we run at a very efficient perspective, or from an efficient standpoint, we can run on the left side there. That would be another hyperconverged solution that starting out would run around 24 gigs of RAM. That will scale up as you add additional functionality to it. We start out at 1 gig, and that'll never scale out to be over 6. Our largest systems that are running those 1.5 petabytes of storage, those will run at max 6 gigs of RAM. And the more important part is it's running a fraction of a core. Whether it's a single node like this it's portraying, or it's a 3-node system. We're running a fraction of a core, which is resources, and those resources are all about the cost efficiency side of it. So not only do we create this efficiency architecture that's better utilizing the resources, leaving more available resources, all those resources are dollars. So we need to make sure that those resources are being fully utilized and they're using it to the best of their capabilities, because as those add up and you multiply that across the sites, it's very important. It becomes cost prohibitive to do it if you need to get hyperconverged infrastructure that's consuming 24 gigs of resources. You're paying an extra 24, the difference being you're paying an extra 23 gigs of resources just to have that operating system installed on it. That's where the efficiency becomes king in this type of market, where we thrive. And I mentioned you're an edge case. So edge has the data centers, it's got the IoT devices, the edge computing. Robo sites have the exact same needs as those edge sites. Robo site could be those financial institutions. It could just be a customer that's got a few sites. And the SMB sites are the exact same as well. You managing all those SMB sites, you could be managing 1 site, 2 sites, 3 sites, 10, 20, 50, however many sites you might be managing. The more that you have to actually go on site to them to actually manage the sites, the higher your costs are increasing. So you share similar needs across all of these types of verticals, or all of these different types of use cases, I should say. And these are all different use cases that we're a great fit into. Now, the difference being that one on the far left there, that edge use case, that's typically a CapEx model that they'll run into. They're going to buy it for all those sites. They don't need that financing aspect to it. Not on all in all use cases. If anything, they're going to go with an OpEx model, but they're going to have that financial aspect probably figured out on their own. In the SMB world, you're charging your customers on a very different model. So you need a solution that fits that model. So to address those needs, while we have the solution that's the perfect fit from a hardware standpoint and the solution aspect, we need to create a pricing model that fits yours, that is in line with the way you're charging your customers, so that it's a lot more cost productive, and it makes it easier to grow with us. So here we see some of our different models that we have, and just baseline resources that we have on the models. I think this is actually, yeah, these ones are actually outdated on the larger side of the storage, because these HC 1000s and 5000s now have the 12 terabyte drives. So they'll actually scale out pretty drastically to around, the HC 5000 will scale out to 144 terabytes in a single node. So they'll get very large, and that should be 2 terabytes in the HC 500. But there's tons of different resources that you can use here. And I put the starting at price on the right. That starting at price is the hardware, it's the software, it's the 24/7, 365 support, all combined into one single monthly price. So very, very cost effective to get in from a starting price point. Just with these, you see the HE 500 there, that could be a tower node. Think of like a dental office. A dental office could have many offices across a region that they cover. You covering all of those different dental offices, most likely. They probably have a server that they're running that's just a tower server. If not, it's a very beefy desktop. That's a perfect solution for a customer like that. Now, what we have coming out later on, I mentioned that we're going to kind of talk roadmap perspectives, is we're actually going smaller. These HE 500s, they serve a purpose for a lot of these SMB customers, but a single node sometimes doesn't quite fit the bill because it doesn't provide that redundancy that you want locally. So we try to find an answer for that type of scenario, or for those scenarios like it's retail, coffee shops, where they really just need a small infrastructure. They don't need much resources at all, but they need that data center like functionality. So what you're going to see coming out, and this isn't a specific use case of it, but a smaller, like coffee cup size system that we're going to be that we'll have launching pre-sale. It'll be later this quarter, and then it'll be fully productized and fully available within our price lists and everything come earlier into January, at some point into Q1, I should say. I won't give a specific date at this point and put pressure on product management, but that's going to be a really neat system as well, because then you're talking to, that HE 500. Well, that customer, not all your customers at that size are going to need that type of redundancy. We can go in there with this smaller system. Let's stack 3 of these smaller systems together using our new HG3 Edge fabric. And now you're creating a redundant system at these sites that is enabling you to give a better SLA to your customers, and it's giving them an additional peace of mind. So it's differentiating you and actually leveraging part of our solution to differentiate yourself, differentiate your solution offering as the underlying technology that's powering that and giving you the capability to be able to do that. So let's walk through a little bit of a scenario, how you can create a profitable business model around this. I mentioned it's basically you're a distributed enterprise. So this is what it would essentially look like. You've got all your different customers. They're all going to vary in the type of resources that they require. Customer 3 that you see in the bottom left there, that could be a 3-node stack. And they could, all of them are going to range in what their requirements are. So that's perfectly fine. Whatever they need, we can get the solution that they need on-prem at those sites. And then we have the built-in backup and disaster recovery, as well as OEM partnerships for things like VDI, third-party backup, and everything as well. So we're going to create a holistic solution that falls under your umbrella that you're offering to them. And you're able to have your customers then, while they're running that on-prem, you can manage them all remotely. You can do things like run those local file-level VM recovery locally for them by accessing it just via any HTML5 browser. And then you can have them replicating all of that workload, all of those workloads back, all those snapshot metadata targets back to your hosted cluster, where you're providing them now a DR as a service model. And then the nice part about the scalability aspect of it, you might start with a 3-node where you're providing DR as a service to customers 1 through 5, and then customer 6 you see there, you're just you're offering some sort of infrastructure as a service, and you need to add a multi-tenancy layer on top of that. We can do that as well if they want to be able to access their VMs. We can leverage that as well. They can just access their VMs. They can play around with the VMs. They can have visibility into who's done what within each of the VMs, but they don't have access to the full cluster, which might be running other customer-sensitive data on it, and a fully white-labeled experience as well that you can create for that. So now you've got this full end-to-end solution that typically would be quite a bit to get into. It's very costly to get into a solution like this. It's also very costly from a labor perspective. It's not as simple to set up and build this business model around, because the onus is essentially on you to create that business model. But as you need to expand this, you can add on additional. So you might start off with 1, 2, 3 customers, maybe 6 like this scenario. Just add on as you need to add on, and you can mix and match, which is very important. You can add on some of our larger nodes. So you saw the HC1000, that might be your 3-node cluster. You want to add on an HC5000 later on. Absolutely, you can do that. You might want to add it redundantly to make sure that you have that redundancy, that if a single node fails and it's the size of the rest of the nodes, that you have that redundancy to fail over the remaining ones. So let's walk you through a cost scenario on this, on what this looks like. You've seen the pricing, you've kind of seen the model, that hub and spoke model that you can create with it. So how we can structure this, and these aren't the starting at prices, these are an actual use case example to show you. On the left there, that's going to be your hosted cluster. So that hosted cluster, it's a 3-node system that you would have. You could have it in your own data center, you could have it in a colo. We also have third parties that we can leverage. That have a data center that's scale centric that we can leverage on that side as well. So if you're interested in any of those pieces, definitely inquire, and we can have a further conversation around that. But that's a 3-node system with 24 cores. It's 384 gigs of RAM and about 40 terabytes raw. So call it 20 terabytes usable capacity, just shy of that. And that's got 10 gig networking. That's $860 a month. So that's going to be your total price for everything that you need at that site. You don't need to add any additional virtualization or anything like that. There'd be networking on top of that, I guess, but that's depending on if it's your data center or your colo. Now your client sites, that's going to be the on-prem solution that you see there. So that one happens to be an HE500. It could be a tower, it could be a single rack node. It's a smaller system, so we're really talking SMB, probably 50 seats or below in this scenario, probably more like 25 seats or below. Running 4 cores, 64 gigs of RAM, so maybe 2 to 6 VMs that they're running. It's an all-flash single node with 1 gig networking. That's going to be $186 a month. So typically what we see here from a pricing standpoint is we see you charging about $500 to manage the server on site and have that fully managed, and not just the server, the full infrastructure that they have there. And then you're going to be charging some sort of a DR as a service model, which usually what we've seen is around 100 terabytes per terabyte, sorry, $100 per terabyte. So that client site's going to have the local backup functionality where you can go recover that. You're providing the DR as a service, so a quick 3-click recovery model, and they can take everything from that client site, and you have that replicated over to your hosted cluster, and you're charging around now $100, so around $600 per client site in this type of model. And you have 2 customers, and you're already over your cost on the actual systems. You're already in the green. So you can see how efficient this can be. And typically what we do with any of our partners is we walk through a model like this to build this out, to see what makes sense, depending on what client refreshes you're aware of. And then I'll get into how we do this as well to build this out to make it a lot more profitable for both of us, and to invest into this partnership together so we can build this out into a much more profitable business model for both of us. And the key with this is, now that we're having this monthly cost, we're eliminating those CapEx costs. So you don't have to over leverage yourself by spending $150,000 up front on an infrastructure and then have to make the money back for that, be out on the cash from that perspective. We can use this on a monthly model so that we're already immediately seeing profits out of the gate. And we're paying off the cluster on the back end to the point where we get to that 3-year period. Maybe it's a 12-month, 36 or 60-month, and then we're going to see more and more profits as we go, and as we grow as well, as we add more clients to it. That hosted cluster on the left side there, while it's going to cover its costs on 2 clients, that can support up to 12 clients of that size. So it becomes very profitable from that perspective. And this isn't always going to be the exact use case that we have, but this is very similar to what we're going to see across any use case that we do, and we'll help build this model out for you. And what we've seen with some of our customers actually is where they'll be running a VMware type environment similar to this, where they're managing VMware for the customers. They typically have a tier 3 tech managing that, and it's a very reactive mentality because you're constantly fixing, making sure that everything's running. When they implemented Scale, what they're able to do is they're able to take that tier 3 tech who's very knowledgeable, can definitely help sell them on get more breadth within their accounts, or help acquire new accounts that they're getting into, and they utilize that resource for that exact purpose. Put them in the field, leverage them for new customers, leverage them for new projects that are going to be revenue generating. And then they took a tier 1 tech that was straight out of school, obviously going to be a lot lower on the price point, and they brought that tier 1 tech in to manage the system. So now that tier 1 tech, it's a great learning opportunity for them, but it's a system that you don't need to pay thousands of dollars just to take them to a course to get certified to be able to run the system. We can teach you how to run the system and set it all up literally on a phone call within a couple hours, and they're pretty proficient at that point. And we can do an advanced course if they want to spend a little bit more time on some of the smaller intricacies of it. Very, very simple to manage from that perspective. So that creates more profit for you and for us together. So as a final takeaway here, partner with us. If you're interested in having a deeper conversation, reach out to us, channel@scalecomputing.com. My email is sman, 2 N's, @scalecomputing.com. Feel free to reach out to me as well. You can hit our partner site, partners.scalecomputing.com, if you want some more information. That'll all end up coming to the same channel alias, so feel free to do it either way. And typically what we do in these scenarios with our partners is we want to get things off to the races fast. We want to make sure that you're not out the cash to try to clear up this cluster, fill up a cluster or something like that. We want to make it profitable for you. So we're going to invest in this relationship as well. There's no upfront cost to sign up with us, so you don't have to pay anything to get certifications or anything like that to become a Scale partner. It's a very straightforward basic reseller agreement that you click accept on, and now you're officially a Scale partner. And then we're going to build out a plan with you to figure out, okay, what are we doing within your region? What region do you serve? How are we going to build this out together? And we can upfront that with MDF to build this out. If you're not targeting after that IT manager, the CIO, maybe you're going after CFOs, CEOs in a certain region, in a certain vertical. We'll go after that together. We'll help build the marketing plan around that, and we'll go after those customers together. Because that's not our typical customer. So that's where we're going to rely heavily on you and your local presence to be able to serve that. And instead of having to do all of these trainings and these courses and send people off site, which can get very costly, we'll do free on-the-job training. So that first installation that you have, we'll come out there. We'll use that as an opportunity to train you, to show you how to do this training, to show you how to do these migration services and get everything up and running, so that the next time you do it, you can still charge your professional services on the first one, but the next time you can do it, you can go do it and have us there remotely to help you, and it'll be a very seamless process, and you'll see how much profit you can make off a solution like us. And with that said, I think I did pretty well. An hour and 30, just over 38 minutes. That's it. That's all I had to cover on the presentation here today. I know it's a lot of information to digest, a lot of different concepts that we went through. So my ask is, if you have any questions, channel@scalecomputing.com. Right after this call, I'm going to make sure to check through that to see if there's any questions that are in there. If you'd like to see the presentation, I'd be more than happy to send it to you. And if you have any specific questions that you don't want to ask in the chat window here, that's not a problem as well. We can definitely address any of that. And as for the Amazon gift cards that we're giving away, we will have somebody following up afterwards on the marketing team that'll be giving out those 3 Amazon gift cards. So thank you everybody for registering and showing up. Carlene, were there any questions that we saw in here?
No, I didn't see any questions submitted.
I was that thorough that there weren't any questions. That's fantastic.
Yep.
All right, well, I appreciate everybody's time today. I know everybody's probably really busy. It's coming to that busy time of the year. So I think we had this scheduled for an hour, but we'll save everybody 22 minutes of their day. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions afterwards. I've obviously got 22 minutes free as well. But thanks everybody for joining. We appreciate it, and we'll look forward to talking to you on the next one.
Thanks. Have a good one. Bye.